slow, calm, personal. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something. Most people think national parks are mapped. Every trail, every creek, every overlook, every acre. They aren't. Not even close. And if you've ever spent enough time deep in the Appalachian Mountains, you'll learn something else. There are places out there that don't appear on any map. And there are reports that never make it into official records. I know because I spent 6 years as a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains. What I'm about to tell you happened during my 5th year. And to this day, I have never received an explanation. Only instructions. Instructions to stop asking questions. Pause. This started with a campfire. A completely ordinary campfire. At least that's what I thought. I was assigned to a remote section of the forest that summer. Not the tourist areas. Not the scenic trails. This was deep backcountry. The kind of place where you could hike for 2 days without seeing another person. My ranger station was a small wooden cabin positioned near an old fire road. 1 room. 1 radio. 1 truck. And miles of forest in every direction. Most shifts were quiet. Lost hikers. Broken trail signs. Occasional illegal campers. Nothing unusual. Then one Thursday morning I received a call from dispatch. A hiker had reported smoke. Not wildfire smoke. Campfire smoke. Deep inside a restricted zone. The problem was simple. Nobody was supposed to be there. The area had been closed for almost a year because of unstable terrain. No camping permits. No hiking permits. No access. Nothing. Dispatch asked me to investigate. So I grabbed my pack, my radio, and started hiking. At first everything seemed normal. The trail wound through dense hardwood forest. Birds were active. Wind moved through the canopy. Nothing felt wrong. But after about an hour I noticed something strange. The forest had gone quiet. Not completely silent. Just missing. No birds. No insects. No movement. As if everything living had stepped away. I remember stopping and listening. The only sound was my own breathing. I told myself I was imagining it. Kept walking. Then I smelled smoke. Fresh smoke. Clothes. A few minutes later I found the campsite. If you can call it that. There was no tent. No vehicle. No equipment. Just a campfire. Still warm. Fresh ash. Someone had been there recently. Very recently. Maybe minutes before I arrived. I searched the area. Nothing. No footprints. No trash. No food wrappers. No sleeping gear. No sign anyone had ever been there. Except the fire. And one other thing. A coffee mug. Sitting beside the fire. Perfectly clean. White ceramic. No logo. No markings. Nothing. I picked it up. Turned it over. And found a date written on the bottom in black marker. The date was 3 days in the future. I stared at it for a moment. Then laughed. I assumed somebody was playing a joke. People leave weird things in parks all the time. I photographed the site. Extinguished the fire. Bagged the mug. And returned to the station. I should have forgotten about it. But I didn't. Because the next morning I received another call. Dispatch wanted to know why I hadn't reported the second campfire. I told them there wasn't a second campfire. There had only been one. The one I found yesterday. Dispatch went quiet. Then they told me another ranger had found fresh smoke in the exact same location. That morning. Less than 12 hours after I cleared it. I thought someone had returned. Annoying. But possible. So I went back. Same trail. Same location. Same clearing. Same fire pit. And there it was. Another fresh campfire. Burning. warm, active, as if I had never been there. I looked around. Nothing. No campers. No equipment. No footprints. Just the fire. And another object beside it. This time it was a compass. Old brass. Scratched. Weathered. And on the back someone had engraved 3 words. Not yet found. That was the first moment I felt uneasy. Not scared. Uneasy. Because it felt deliberate. As if someone knew I would find these things. As if they were being left specifically for me. I collected the compass. Returned to the station. And filed the report. That afternoon my supervisor called. I explained everything. The repeated campfire. The objects. The messages. The future date. The compass. There was a long silence. Then he asked me a question. A strange question. He asked, "Did you write any of that in the official report?" I said yes. Of course. Why wouldn't I? Another silence. Then he told me to remove it. Every bit of it. Just report unauthorized campfires. Nothing else. No mug. No compass. No messages. No future date. Nothing. I laughed. Thought he was joking. He wasn't. His voice had changed. Completely serious. Almost nervous. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Some things don't belong in the system." And hung up. At the time I thought he was being ridiculous. I had no idea that within a week, I would find my own name carved into a dead tree. A tree that had been dead for decades. And that was when the real problem started. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what my supervisor had said. Some things don't belong in the system. At first, I assumed he was covering up something embarrassing. Illegal campers. A local prank. Maybe even a ranger who didn't want extra paperwork. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Because people don't usually get nervous over a coffee mug. Or a compass. Especially not experienced supervisors who had spent 20 years in the mountains. Still, I had work to do. And by Monday morning, I was back on patrol. The weather had changed. Heavy clouds hung low over the ridges. The forest felt darker than usual. Not because it was actually dark. Just oppressive. Like the trees were absorbing sound. I was hiking near the restricted zone again when I noticed something ahead. A dead tree. Leafless. Completely gray from age. I'd passed it dozens of times before. Never paid attention to it. This time something caught my eye. There was fresh wood exposed on the trunk. Someone had carved into it. I walked closer. At first I thought it was initials. Then I saw the full word. My last name. Carved 6 feet above the ground. Perfectly centered. Perfectly fresh. I froze. There are certain things your brain refuses to process immediately. This was one of them. Because it wasn't just my last name. It was my full name. First, middle, last. Every letter perfectly cut into the wood. I stepped closer. Ran my fingers across the grooves. Fresh. Recently carved. No question. Yet the tree itself was ancient. Dead for years. Maybe decades. The bark surrounding the letters was weathered. Gray. Old. But the cuts looked new. As if somebody had walked out there yesterday and carved my name specifically for me to find. I checked the area. Nothing. No footprints. No campsite. No tools. No sign of another person. Just my name. Waiting for me. I took photographs. Lots of them. Then I radioed dispatch. The call never connected. Static. That's all I got. Which wasn't unusual. Radio dead zones existed throughout the mountains. So I climbed a nearby ridge to get better reception. Halfway up the hill, my radio crackled. Then I heard a voice. My voice. I nearly dropped the radio. At first I thought it was an echo. Then I listened carefully. The voice coming through the speaker sounded exactly like me. Same tone. Same cadence. Same breathing. And it was speaking. Not repeating. Speaking. Dispatch, this is Ranger Walker. I stared at the radio. I hadn't said that. The transmission continued. Everything is normal. Static. Then silence. I stood there for several seconds, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, trying to come up with any explanation. Crossed signal. Equipment malfunction. Someone playing a recording. Anything. But deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. That evening I returned to the cabin. For the first time since becoming a ranger, I locked the door. Not because I felt threatened, because I felt watched. There's a difference. Threats feel direct. Watching feels patient. And patience is worse. The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Darkness settled over the forest. I cooked dinner. Read a few pages from an old paperback. Tried to distract myself. Around 10 p.m., the radio activated by itself. A burst of static filled the room. Then a voice spoke. Again. My voice. Only this time it said something different. Ranger Walker, do you copy? I stared at the radio. Every hair on my arms stood up. Because that was my standard call sign. The exact phrase dispatch used. The exact phrase fellow rangers used. Yet nobody should have been transmitting. I picked up the microphone. Who is this? Silence. Then more static. Then my own voice replied. Who is this? Repeating me. Perfectly. Word for word. A delay of maybe 2 seconds. I set the radio down. Suddenly very aware of how alone I was. There were no nearby cabins. No nearby homes. No nearby roads. Just forest. Miles and miles of forest. And somewhere beyond the walls, something had copied my voice. The next morning I requested maintenance check the radio. They found nothing wrong. No interference. No damage. No recordings. Everything tested perfectly. When I mentioned the strange transmission, the technician's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. I asked if he'd heard something similar before. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Don't answer if it calls again." I laughed nervously. He didn't. Then he walked away. By that point I had stopped sleeping properly. Every strange thing by itself could be explained. The campfires, the objects, the tree, the radio. Individually they were strange. Together, they were becoming a pattern. And patterns are harder to ignore. I started reviewing old ranger reports. Years of records. Looking for anything similar. At first I found nothing. Then I noticed gaps. Entire sections missing. Missing reports. Missing incident logs. Missing maintenance records. As if somebody had removed specific pages. Carefully. Deliberately. Only one thing remained. A handwritten note tucked between 2 old binders. No signature. No date. Just one sentence. Written in faded pencil. If you hear yourself in the woods, leave immediately. Pause. That note should have been enough. It should have convinced me to stop looking. To transfer. To forget everything. Instead, it made me curious. And curiosity is what led me to the trail camera footage. The footage that would keep me awake for the next 6 years. Because something had been standing outside my cabin every night. and I had never once seen it. I didn't discover the trail camera footage by accident. I found it because I had finally run out of explanations. For nearly 2 weeks, strange things had been happening around my cabin. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make a good story by itself. Just little things. Things that felt wrong. A chair slightly moved from where I left it. A cabinet door standing open when I knew I'd closed it. Boot prints outside after rain. One set. Always one set. And always ending at the tree line. Never beginning. Only ending. As if whoever made them had walked out of the forest. And then disappeared. I never found matching tracks leading back. That bothered me more than it should have. So I installed 2 trail cameras. One facing the cabin. One facing the forest. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a bear. Maybe a curious hiker. Maybe proof that exhaustion was making me paranoid. What I got was something else entirely. The first night showed nothing unusual. The second night looked normal too. The third night, I almost missed it. I was scrolling through hundreds of photographs. Most triggered by wind, branches, animals, shadows. Then one image made me stop. There was a figure standing near the tree line. Far enough away that details were difficult to make out, but close enough that it was obviously human-shaped. Oh, still. Watching the cabin. I zoomed in. The image became grainy. The figure remained impossible to identify. No facial features. No clothing details. Just a dark silhouette, standing perfectly motionless. I checked the timestamp. 2:13 a.m. I moved to the next image. The figure was still there. Exactly the same position. Not a single visible movement. I checked the next photo. Same position. And the next. And the next. For nearly 40 minutes of photographs. It never moved. Not once. That alone should have terrified me. Instead, I convinced myself there was an explanation. A tree stump. A shadow. Camera distortion. Something harmless. Then I opened footage from the 4th night. And my stomach dropped. The figure was back. Same location. Same posture. Same distance from the cabin. As if it had returned specifically to stand in the exact same place. Watching. Again. I reviewed the 5th night. Same thing. The 6th night. Same thing. The 7th night. Same thing. Every image captured between roughly 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. contained the figure. Outside that time window. Nothing. No sign it had ever been there. No arrival. No departure. Just presence. Then absence. Like somebody flipping a switch. I took the images to my supervisor. I expected concern. Maybe an investigation. Maybe police involvement. Instead, he barely looked at them. He slid the photographs back across the desk and said, "Delete them." I thought he was joking. Again. He wasn't. I asked if he recognized the figure. He said no. I asked if other rangers had reported similar incidents. He didn't answer. Then he said something strange. Something that still bothers me. He said, "Most people only see it once." Not him. Not her. Not a person. The word slipped out so naturally that I knew he'd used it before. Maybe many times. I asked what he meant. He stood up, walked to the window, looked out toward the mountains, and refused to answer. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside felt amplified. Every creak of the cabin made me look toward the door. Eventually I gave up trying. Around 2 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. The same time window shone in the photographs. The same hour the figure appeared. I kept glancing toward the window. Nothing. The forest remained dark and silent. At 2:17 a.m., my radio activated. Static. Then a voice. My voice. But this time it wasn't repeating me. It wasn't copying dispatch. It was saying something entirely new. 3 words. Slowly. Deliberately. Look outside, Walker. I froze. Every muscle locked. The voice had used my name. Not my call sign. My name. The radio fell silent. I stared at the window. Part of me wanted to look. Part of me absolutely did not. For several seconds I couldn't move. Then curiosity won. I stood, walked toward the glass, and looked outside. The clearing was empty. No figure. No movement. Nothing. I almost laughed from relief. Then I noticed something. Not outside. Inside. Reflected in the glass. Behind me. Standing at the far end of the room. I spun around instantly. Nothing. The cabin was empty. Completely empty. My heart hammered in my chest. I looked back toward the window. The reflection was gone. I didn't sleep at all after that. When dawn arrived, I felt exhausted. But I also felt angry. I wanted answers. And I was beginning to suspect those answers already existed somewhere. Buried in reports nobody wanted me reading. That afternoon I drove to an old Ranger archive building several counties away. Most employees didn't even know it existed. Thousands of documents were stored there. Decades of records. Most untouched. Most forgotten. I spent hours digging through old files. Searching for anything related to unexplained incidents. Missing hikers. Unauthorized campsites. Strange radio activity. Anything. Near sunset I found a report dated 31 years earlier. The author was another ranger. Stationed in the same district. Working from the same cabin. The report had never been completed. Half the pages were missing. But one section remained. And what I read made my blood run cold. The ranger described unregistered campfires. Objects appearing without explanation. A voice on the radio using his own voice. And a figure standing outside the cabin at night. Watching. Exactly watching. The same thing. The same sequence. 31 years before I arrived. Then I reached the final page. The last surviving paragraph. The last words the ranger ever submitted. And they were underlined 3 times. They aren't watching the cabin. They're watching whoever lives inside. The report ended there. No explanation. No follow-up. No final conclusion. Just that sentence. And one handwritten note in the margin. A note added by someone else years later. 5 words. Do not let it learn. Pause. I wish I had listened. Because 2 nights later, it stopped standing outside. And that was far worse.